All right, we are still in Module 2, Financial Mathematics, and this section, 10.2, we're going to be talking about simple interest. Money has a present value and a future value, unless you're lending money to a friend maybe. If you invest a certain amount of money, the present value, for a promise of getting a future value, you hopefully expect the future value to be more than the current, otherwise, why do it? The same principle also works in reverse. If you're getting a present value today from someone, maybe in cash or goods, you expect to have to pay a future value back at some point. So if we're given the present value, how do we find the future value and vice versa? The answer depends on several variables, but the most important one is the interest rate. Interest is the return the lender or investor expects as a reward for the use of his or her money, and the standard way to describe an interest rate is a yearly rate, commonly known as APR. Thus, we can say, I'm investing my money in an account that pays an APR of 5%, or I have to pay a 24% APR on the balance of my credit card. Later, we'll talk about that. That's a very high APR. The APR is the most important variable in computing the return on an investment or the cost of a loan, but there are several other questions to be considered. Is the interest simple or compounded? If it's compounded, how often is it compounded? Are there any additional fees? And if so, are they in addition to the interest, or are they included in the APR? In simple interest, only the original money invested or borrowed, we use the term principal, generates interest over time. So you put in $200 and that's what you're making money on over time, that $200, nothing else. But compound interest is where the principal generates interest and then the principal plus the interest generates more interest and so on. So let's say you start with $200 and then in year one you make $10 on interest. Now the next year you're going to be accruing interest on that $210. And so compound interest is going to be covered in our next video. So we're just going to be talking about simple interest. Imagine that on a day you were born, your parents purchased a $1,000 savings bond that pays 5% annual simple interest. What is the value of the bond on your 18th birthday? What is the value of the bond on any given birthday? So the principal is 1,000 and the percentage rate is 5%. Now remember, when we actually do math with percentages, we want to get that right into a decimal. So this means what we're talking about is that the interest of the bond earns 5% of 1,000. Remember that of means multiply. And again, we're going to take that 5% and turn it into a decimal. So what we're saying is in 1 year, you can make $50. Now, because it's simple interest, the interest earned by the bond is the same every year. So that's really the main difference between simple and compound. So the value of the bond on your first birthday is that principal plus 1 year of interest. On the second birthday, it's one principal plus 2 years of interest. So on your 18th birthday, it's the principal plus 18 years of interest. And so you can use kind of the variable t to say at any year you can really figure out what your interest will be. The simple interest formula is given here. And the variables for that formula are right there. So we're really using the present value, the length of the time in years, and the APR. These are the variables to consider the future value. All right, so the next example, we're going to actually use that formula. So government bonds are often sold based on their future value. So suppose you want to buy a 5-year $1,000 treasury bond paying 4.28% annual simple interest, so that in 5 years you can cash in the bond for $1,000. So here, 1,000 is actually the future value, and the price you pay is the present value. So again, you're going to pay less. Well, hopefully you're going to pay less so that you make money, and it ends up being 1,000. So how do we figure out the present value? So we've got this formula here. We know that the future value is 1,000. We don't know the principal value. The 1 plus stays. The time for this bond to mature is 5 years, and the rate, always remember, we always use decimals, never percents themselves. So we plug it in, then we're going to divide both sides by 1.214. 1.2, sorry, 214. And so we get about $823.72. So basically what the Treasury bond is saying, if you buy it for $823 today, in 5 years, it'll be worth $1,000. Okay, let's talk about credit cards. Generally speaking, credit cards do have very high interest rates, but this is a really important key point. You only have to pay interest if you don't pay the monthly balance in full. So a credit card is really a two-edged sword. If you make a minimum payment or carry a balance from 1 month to the next, you will pay a lot of money. But if you pay your balance in full, you will never pay interest. So basically, what does interest mean? It means you're borrowing money for the credit card. Let's say you buy a TV for $5,000 and you don't have $5,000. Now you're paying interest for borrowing that money. But if you have the $5,000, you just put it on the credit card and then you pay it off. You don't lose any money or pay any interest because you borrowed the money, but you paid it right back. If you pay your balance in full, it's essentially free short-term loan. When used wisely, a credit card gives you a rare opportunity. You get to use someone else's money for free. But if you use it unwisely, it's a very huge financial trap. Another thing is that if you get a miles or rewards card, you're not just using someone else's money for free, but you're actually getting benefits. Again, making sure you pay off that monthly fee. Okay, so let's take a look at an example. Imagine you recently got a new credit card. Like most people, you did not pay much attention to the terms of use, right? We just sign away. And the APR, which is 24%, which can get really high. To make matters worse, you went out and spent a little more than you should have the first month. And when your first statement came in, you were surprised to find your new balance was $876. Like with most credit cards, you have a little time from the time you got the statement to the payment. It's usually around 20 days. So you could pay, right? You spent this money, right? You could pay the $20 minimum payment, or you could pay the full amount, $876, or any other amount in between. So we're going to look at these different scenarios to see what makes the most sense. Option 1, pay the full balance of $876 before the payment due date. This one's easy. If you do that, you'll pay no interest and you get to free use of that credit card's money for that short period of time. And then when your next monthly bill comes, it will only have the charges for new purchases. Okay, let's say you only pay the $20. When your next monthly bill comes, you have a new balance of $1165, consisting of several pieces. 1, that's that previous balance of $856. Remember, you paid $20, so it's not $876, it's $856, okay? Now, the charges for the new purchase. Let's say, for argument's sake, that you were a little more careful because that was crazy last month, and you only put $288. All right, so let's see here. The finance charge of $21 calculated as followed. You had the periodic rate of 0.02, the balance subject to the finance charge was $10.50, and the finance charge came out to be $21. So you might wonder, together with the millions of other credit card users, where these numbers came from. The periodic rate is obtained by dividing the APR by the number of billing periods. Almost all credit cards use monthly billing periods, so you're looking at 12. So your credit card had a rate of 24% and a periodic rate of 2%. The balance subject to finance charge is obtained by taking the average of the daily balances over the previous billing period. Since this balance includes your new purchases, all of a sudden you're paying interest on all your purchases and you lost that grace period. So in your case, the balance subject to finance charges came to $10.50. The finance charge was obtained by multiplying the periodic rate and the balance subject to the finance charge. So option 3, you decided to make a payment that is more than the minimum payment, but less than the full amount. Let's just say you decided to do $400. So when your next bill comes, you have a new balance of $776. Remember, that new balance is the $476 left, the new purchases of $288, and the finance charge of $1364. So there's a lot of different things that come in. You're paying fees on top of fees, and so it can rapidly add up really, really quick. So make sure you understand the terms of your credit card, know the APR, know that length of that grace period, and try to read as much as the fine print as you can. And then make a real effort to pay that balance in full each month. It's going to help you avoid financial charges, and it's going to keep you out of a financial hole because you're paying fees on top of the fees and then on top of the fees, and it can get really cumbersome really quickly. The book likes to say if you can't make your credit card payments in full, then you might be living beyond your means, and you may consider putting the credit card away until the balance is paid down. Because again, if you just keep putting new charges, you're going to keep getting new finance fees. All right, in this next section, we're going to talk about compound interest.